Okay, Stephen, you have released a new album right now, and Cannot Erase. It's about Joyce Vincent, who lay 3 years in her flat dead. And there's a film, Dreams of a Life. It's the background of this album. It's a concept. So what was the reason or the inspiration to take this story for your new album, and Cannot Erase?
The story... Well, firstly, it's important to say that the character in my album is not Joyce Carol Vincent. It's a character that's inspired by Joyce Carol Vincent. The Joyce Carol Vincent story for me was so powerful because for me it was very symbolic of our lives in the 21st century, and specifically the lives of people that live in the city in the 21st century, and how easy it is, I think, to become invisible if you live in the city and you are the kind of person who is afraid of the modern world, and who wouldn't be afraid of the modern world with terrorism and paedophiles and all the technology we're surrounded by 24 hours a day now, cell phones, the internet, the TV that we have. We're almost like bombarded with information, and a lot of it is bad, negative information. And I think there is now a new generation of people who are going to feel very isolated and very disconnected from the modern world. And for me, this story of Joyce Carol Vincent was a very a good kind of like symbol of that whole issue, that whole kind of modern world.
And does it have autobiographical elements as well? Do you feel sometimes isolated, maybe as a well-known artist, or maybe in other aspects?
I certainly understand that impulse to not want to leave the house, not want to venture into this scary, confusing, crazy, fast universe, this world that we live in, and I think everyone can understand that impulse, that kind of feeling, I just don't want to go outside my front door. I'm fine in my little cocoon here. I don't want to go out into that world that I see on the TV. And I think everyone can understand that. So yes, absolutely, there is a lot of myself in this character.
And the 3 words, and cannot erase, how do the 3 words relate to the story?
I don't want to tell you, but I'll answer your question by telling you why I don't want to tell you. I think one of the things about giving a title to a record, of course you have to do it. You have to give a title to your record. It's unfortunate in a way, because in a way when you give a title to a record, or to a song for that matter, you're almost telling the listener how to interpret the song. This is an album which deals with many different things. It deals with modern life, it deals with nostalgia for childhood, it deals with the internet, social networking, confusion, fear, all the things we talked about. And I could have called the album The Loneliness of Living in the City.
For example.
But that's too specific.
That's too.
And I like the fact that the title I've chosen is ambiguous. It's not clear necessarily what... It does have a meaning to me, but I don't really... And already I've had people come up to me and they've given me their own interpretation of the title, which is nothing to do with mine. I like that. I like the fact that people have their own kind of interpretation of the title and the whole concept. And I don't want to spoil that,
Okay. The story is a little bit sad, cruel, and very social criticism behind it. Does this social criticism or the story has influenced your music? Is it because The Raven That Refused to Sing was a different thematical concept? It was more transcendent, but this is down to earth. So did the story have an effect on the way of composing, songwriting, and the atmosphere of the album?
I think definitely the theme or the concept of any record always has a direct influence on the music. For example, you mentioned The Raven That Refused to Sing. Now that album was based on this idea of almost classical supernatural stories, going back to Edgar Allan Poe and M.R. James and Arthur Machen and these kind of guys from the early 20th century. So for me, that suggested a very vintage kind of sound in a way, and it did have a kind of an almost old-fashioned sound to it. Now, here's a story set in the modern world, in the heart of the metropolis. So straight away I'm thinking, more use of electronic sound, more use of almost industrial textures, and also it's the story of someone's whole life. So you have the opportunity to express many different phases of life, many different emotions, from joy to confusion to fear to anger to melancholia and I think all of those things are reflected and kind of influence the approach to the music.
So I guess this new album is a little more song orientated. Well, it's my impression as the one before the Raven that refused to sing, because the Raven was more based on moods, atmosphere, sounds, and this is more song orientated.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some things on this record that are very direct and very simple and very concise. Yeah. And there are some elements that sound like Rush, for example. In 3 Years Older or Regret Number 9. Do you agree there are some elements of Rush? Here's what I'll say. You're not the first person to say that. I'm not consciously aware of it. And actually, one of the things that I think people think sounds like Rush, to me, is Pete Townshend. And actually, it makes sense because Alex Lifeson was very influenced by Pete Townshend. So the thing that in fact, when I was working on that song 3 Years Older, my working title was The Who. Because that for me is pure Townsend. But people have said to me, that's Rush. And I'm like, well, no, but I can see why they say that, because I think Alex did take a lot from the kind of Townsend thing. To me, that was always Townsend. So I think what's interesting about what you're saying is, I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong, but there are some influences which are conscious, and there are some influences which come through the subconscious. Listen, I'm a big Rush fan, so of course it's probably in there.
That's good. And the album was recorded in England with the same line-up as the one before. So was it a positive aspect for the musical work to have the same line-up, or was it maybe a problem, or how would you see it?
No, I think it was great to work with some of the same guys, because obviously we've worked together for a while now, so there's a good established kind of connection, and I think I got more out of them this time than I did on the last album. I pushed them a little bit harder into other areas, which was good. But there's a lot of other people on this record. It's not just the band. There's, there's actually 2 different drummers. There's 3 guitar players on the record, including me. There's a group of choir boys. There's an orchestra. There's a female singer. So there's a lot more musical elements on this record.
The female singer, that's a good thing. Does she represent the main character, the Joyce Vincent? Does she represent this person?
Yes. I wanted to have... Obviously, if I'm writing from the perspective of a female character, it was logical then to have actually a female presence on the record. So that was kind of that part of that thinking.
And is this a strong concept? If you will perform this album live, do you have to play the whole concept and the whole record, or can you pick up some songs from this album, play them individually in...
Well, I do. I mean, I hope both. Obviously, on this particular tour I'm about to do, we'll be playing pretty much most of the record and playing it in sequence. But I also like to think that the tracks all stand up on their own, And there are songs that in the future I could take out and just do alone. But certainly on this tour, yes, it will be mainly the whole record.
And the Raven, that was produced by you and Alan Parsons, but I guess this new album was produced on your own. You didn't have an external producer, or... Alan didn't really produce. He engineered the last record. I think he got an executive producer credit, but that was more contractual thing. Alan was the engineer, fantastic, and he did a beautiful job. On this record, again, I worked with a fantastic engineer, a guy called Steve Orchard, who's Sir Paul McCartney's engineer. So he knows what he's doing too. I think Alan was perfect for The Raven, because that was an album that I wanted to have this kind of vintage 70s sound to it. This album I did want to sound more modern, and not that Alan can't do that, but I think that it made sense to have someone else this time. And the album has got a very demanding artwork, very beautiful and very intense. So did you create it on your own, or did you give the main ideas to the artist or to be the designer, or how did you approach that?
There's three main guys that were involved in the artwork. Lasse Hoyle, the photographer, Hayo Muller is the German chap who did the Raven, who's in illustration, and Carl Glover was the designer. And Carl was very important this time because we were trying to create a document of someone's whole life. So part of that involved creating official things like birth certificates, newspaper cuttings, letters, postcards, and all of those things are part of the special packaging. No, I sit down and I talk with these guys and I explain the concept to them, I explain the story, and I have my own, but I'm not an artist, I can't do this stuff.
No. But I saw a book,
yes.
There's a book, a huge special edition.
Yeah.
What's behind the special edition?
It's basically laid out, this young woman is writing a diary about her life, and because she's completely isolated, it's a very kind of internal dialogue she has. Yeah. So I had to find a way to communicate that to the audience, and the way that I discovered to communicate her kind of internal dialogue was through a blog or through a diary. So this blog forms the basis of the special edition, and it's illustrated with photographs, drawings, paintings, official documents. It was a really complex thing to put together, but it's come out beautifully.
Yes, good. And you will go on tour with this, new album, and you are well known for your, also demanding video projections, rear screen projections, and video clips. So, what can the fan expect, or what will it? Can you give some hints in which direction will this artwork for this tour will go?
All of that, but bigger and better. I mean, we've got a fantastically visual. The whole concept is very visual. So I have 3 filmmakers working on new films for the tour, and it's going to be hopefully bigger, more spectacular than ever before.
Well, that's good. I hope. In the last tour, you played in seated venues. It was the situation that you played in seated. How were the reactions on that? And now will you keep it up, playing in seated venues? Is it better or
we do? Yeah, I mean, I understand that some of the people that come to my shows want to sit down and just be kind of able to observe and immerse themselves in the experience, and other people like to come along and be standing up and headbang or whatever it is they want to do. To me, the ideal venue is one that has a combination of seating and standing, but you can't always have everything you want. Sometimes I play to it's slightly odd playing to a seated audience because you don't feel a lot of reaction. But I kind of got used to it now, and I do understand from the audience perspective. Sometimes, particularly older people like me, if I go to a show, I usually want to sit down and just watch. I totally understand that. Yeah.
And what is your many prog rock bands have a very faithful audience, but they are not very successful. I know many bands, prog rock bands, but you are extremely successful. So what is your recipe for being so successful and charted high and having so many fans? What do you think?
Honestly, I think the answer to that question is I'm not interested in being in a prog rock band.
No.
And I think you hear that in the music. When you listen to my music, I acknowledge that I'm definitely in the tradition of progressive rock artists, but actually I never saw myself as someone that just made progressive rock. And if you listen to this record, Hand Cannot Raise, for example, you'll hear songs on there that are pure pop. And you'll hear songs that are electronic, and you'll hear death metal riffing, and you'll hear ambient interludes, and you'll hear singer-songwriter ballads. And I think that's the secret, is I'm not interested in being I'm not interested in being in a genre. And the music kind of reflects that. And I think that's why the audience is much broader than just prog rock, you know what I mean? Although they like the music too, so that's my answer.
Thank you for this nice interview, Stephen.
My pleasure.
Great success.